America's car history is filled with famous legends, but many interesting models quietly vanish from memory. Hidden behind the success of giants like Ford and Chevrolet were dozens of cars that most people today have never heard of.
Please support us and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.
The Buick Special was never meant to be the most glamorous car on the road. It was not the biggest Buick, nor the most expensive. Instead, it was built with a simple and honest purpose: to give everyday American families the chance to own a car from Buick, a name that for decades represented quality, reliability, and a touch of prestige. Quietly, without much attention, the Buick Special carried thousands of families to work, school, church, vacations, and new beginnings across America. To understand why the Buick Special mattered so much, it helps to picture the American automobile world of the mid-20th century. Buick had a reputation as a step above ordinary transportation. It was known for smooth engines, comfortable interiors, and elegant styling. For many people, owning a Buick meant that you had reached a certain level of success. But Buick also understood that not every family could afford its largest and most luxurious models. So the company offered the Special as its entry-level vehicle. The idea was simple: provide the quality and engineering that Buick was known for, but at a price that more buyers could manage. The Special first appeared in the 1930s, and it quickly became an important part of Buick's lineup. Over the years, it evolved with changing tastes and technology, but its purpose remained the same. It was the Buick that ordinary people could own. By the early 1950s, the Special had become a familiar sight on American streets. Its styling reflected the optimism of the era. The body lines were smooth and graceful, with just enough chrome to give the car a sense of elegance without being overly flashy. The front grille often featured the distinctive Buick teeth, a design that made the car instantly recognizable. Standing beside a Buick Special in the mid-1950s, you might notice the careful balance of style and practicality. The hood stretched forward confidently, while the roofline flowed smoothly toward the rear. Chrome trim highlighted the body's curves, catching the sunlight as the car moved down the road. Inside, the Special offered the kind of comfort that made long drives enjoyable. The seats were wide and cushioned, designed to carry entire families with ease. The dashboard was clean and simple, with gauges that were easy to read and controls that felt solid in the driver's hands. For someone who is now around 60 years old, hearing about cars like the Buick Special may bring back memories of family stories. Perhaps a parent or grandparent owned one. Perhaps it was the car that carried a young couple on their first road trip or took children to school every morning. The Buick Special was not just a machine, it was part of daily life. One of the reasons people trusted the Special was Buick's reputation for smooth and reliable engines. During the 1950s, many Specials were powered by Buick's famous Buick Nailhead V8. This engine had a distinctive design with vertical valve covers that resembled nails standing upright, which is how it earned its nickname. The Nailhead V8 was known for its strong torque and smooth performance. When the driver pressed the accelerator, the engine delivered steady power that made highway driving comfortable and effortless. Imagine starting a Buick Special in a quiet morning in the 1950s. The engine turns over, then settles into a gentle rumble. The steering wheel feels large and reassuring in your hands. As you pull onto the road, the car glides forward with calm confidence. Driving a Special was not about speed or excitement. It was about comfort, reliability, and the pleasure of a smooth ride. That smooth ride became one of Buick's trademarks. Engineers worked carefully to design suspensions that absorbed bumps and rough pavement. As a result, passengers often described Buicks as some of the most comfortable cars on the road. This comfort made the Special an ideal family vehicle. It carried parents to work, children to school, and families on weekend outings. On summer vacations, luggage would fill the trunk while the car carried its passengers across long stretches of highway. Picture a summer afternoon in 1956. A Buick Special sits in the driveway, its paint shining in the sunlight. Suitcases are loaded into the trunk, the family climbs inside, windows roll down to let in the warm breeze. The engine starts, and soon the car is moving down the road toward a beach or a national park. Moments like these were repeated thousands of times across the country. The Special became part of countless family memories. Over the years, Buick continued to refine the Special. Styling changed as new trends appeared. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, tail fins grew taller and chrome trim became more dramatic. Later designs became sleeker and more modern as automotive tastes evolved. Yet through all these changes, the basic idea remained the same. The Special was still the Buick designed for everyday drivers. During the 1960s, the model took on a slightly sportier character. Some versions of the Special even became the foundation for performance cars. One famous example was the Buick Skylark, which began as a higher trim version of the Special. This connection to later performance models shows how influential the Special platform became. Despite its long history and importance, the Buick Special is sometimes overlooked today. Collectors often focus on more glamorous Buicks or rare performance models, yet the Special represents something equally meaningful: the dependable car that quietly served millions of drivers. At classic car shows today, a restored Buick Special often attracts a certain kind of admiration. People may stop and smile as they recognize the shape or remember seeing one when they were young. Someone might say, "My parents had one just like that." Another might recall family trips taken decades ago. These memories show that the Special's legacy is not just about engineering or design. It is about the role the car played in everyday life. Driving a Buick Special today feels like stepping into a gentler era of motoring. The large steering wheel moves smoothly in your hands. The engine hums steadily. The car glides along the road with a calm dignity that modern vehicles rarely match. There are no digital displays or complicated electronic systems. Instead, the experience is simple and direct. You feel the movement of the car and the rhythm of the road. For those who appreciate automotive history, the Buick Special represents a different kind of classic car. It wasn't built to be flashy or rare. It was built to serve. And in doing that job quietly and faithfully for decades, the Buick Special became one of the most meaningful automobiles of its time, a car that helped shape the everyday journeys of American families. The Plymouth Cranbrook was once one of the most common sights on American roads. In the early 1950s, you could drive through almost any town in the United States and see several of them parked along the streets, sitting in driveways or cruising slowly down the highway. It was not the most expensive car, nor the most powerful, but it was dependable, practical, and affordable. For thousands of families, the Cranbrook was simply the car that carried them through everyday life. To understand the Cranbrook, it helps to remember the role of Plymouth in the American car market. Plymouth had been created by Chrysler Corporation as a brand for budget-conscious buyers. While Chrysler itself built luxury cars and Dodge offered slightly more upscale models, Plymouth focused on providing reliable transportation at a price ordinary people could afford. By the time the Cranbrook appeared in 1951, Plymouth had already earned a reputation for building solid and dependable vehicles. Many buyers trusted the brand because its cars were known for durability and mechanical simplicity. The Cranbrook sat in the middle of Plymouth's lineup. It was more refined than the most basic models, but still affordable enough for middle-class families. In many ways, it represented the heart of Plymouth's mission: practical transportation that did not sacrifice comfort or style. From the outside, the Cranbrook looked like a typical American car of the early 1950s. The body was rounded and smooth, reflecting the styling trends that followed World War II. The front grille was wide and friendly-looking, with chrome details that gave the car a sense of dignity. Unlike the dramatic fins and futuristic shapes that would appear later in the decade, the Cranbrook's design was calm and balanced. It looked solid and trustworthy, much like the people who drove it. Standing beside a Cranbrook in 1952, you might notice how comfortably proportioned it was. The hood stretched forward in a gentle curve, while the roofline arched gracefully over the passenger compartment. The rear of the car was rounded, giving it a soft, welcoming appearance. Inside the cabin, the Cranbrook offered a spacious interior that could easily accommodate a family. The front seat was a wide bench designed to hold 3 passengers if necessary. The rear seat was equally generous, making it easy for children or friends to ride comfortably. The dashboard was simple but attractive. Gauges were clearly visible and the controls were placed where drivers could reach them easily. In an era before complicated electronics, everything was mechanical and straightforward. For someone who is now around 60 years old, hearing about cars like the Cranbrook may bring back memories of stories told by parents or grandparents. In the early 1950s, owning a car was becoming a normal part of American life, but it was still something families valued deeply. A car like the Cranbrook represented independence. It allowed families to travel farther, visit relatives, and explore the growing network of American highways. Under the hood, the Cranbrook used a dependable 6-cylinder engine known as the Chrysler Flathead 6. This engine was not designed for speed or racing, but it had a reputation for reliability that drivers appreciated. The Flathead 6 ran smoothly and could last for many years if properly maintained. Mechanics found it easy to repair, and parts were widely available. This simplicity made the Cranbrook a practical choice for families who needed a car they could depend on. Driving a Cranbrook was a calm and relaxed experience. The engine produced a gentle hum rather than a loud roar. The suspension absorbed bumps in the road, allowing passengers to enjoy a comfortable ride. Imagine starting the engine on a quiet morning in 1952. The car warms up as sunlight reflects off the chrome trim. The driver shifts into gear and slowly pulls away from the curb, heading toward work, school, or the grocery store. The Cranbrook was built for exactly these everyday journeys. During the early 1950s, America was changing quickly. Suburbs were expanding, and families were moving farther from city centers. Cars became essential for commuting, shopping, and social visits. The Cranbrook fit perfectly into this new lifestyle. It was reliable enough for daily use and comfortable enough for weekend trips. Picture a family preparing for a summer vacation in 1953. Suitcases are packed into the trunk, children climb into the back seat, and the engine starts with a soft rumble. The road stretches out ahead, and the Cranbrook carries the family toward a beach, a national park, or a distant relative's home. These journeys were repeated thousands of times across the country. Because so many Cranbrooks were built and used, they became a familiar part of everyday life. Unlike luxury cars that were admired from a distance, the Cranbrook was the car of neighbors, teachers, shop owners, and young families. Ironically, that very popularity is one reason the Cranbrook is rarely seen today. Because it was considered an ordinary car rather than a collector's item, many examples were simply used until they wore out and were eventually scrapped. As decades passed and new cars replaced old ones, the Cranbrook gradually disappeared from the roads. Today, seeing a well-preserved Cranbrook is a special experience. The car stands as a reminder of an era when reliability and practicality mattered more than speed or luxury. At classic car shows, a restored Cranbrook often attracts visitors who appreciated simple charm. The chrome shines, the paint glows in soft pastel colors, and the car's rounded shape brings back memories of a quieter time. For enthusiasts, the Cranbrook represents a piece of everyday history. It may not be as rare or glamorous as some classic cars, but it tells an important story about the lives of ordinary Americans. Driving one today feels like stepping into the early 1950s. The steering wheel is large and comfortable. The engine runs steadily. The car moves down the road with a gentle rhythm that encourages patience rather than speed. There are no digital screens or modern driver aids. Instead, there is a simple connection between driver and machine. The Plymouth Cranbrook reminds us that history is not made only by famous or expensive cars. Sometimes the vehicles that truly shape everyday life are the ones that quietly serve millions of people without seeking attention. The Cranbrook did exactly that. For thousands of families, it was the car that carried groceries home, took children to school, and turned ordinary roads into pathways toward new memories. The Chrysler Windsor was never the flashiest car on the road, and perhaps that is exactly why it is so interesting today. It was designed not to shout for attention, but to quietly deliver comfort, reliability, and dignity to the people who drove it. In its day, the Windsor was a familiar presence on American streets, serving families, professionals, and travelers who wanted a solid automobile without stepping all the way up to the most expensive models. To understand the Windsor, it helps to understand the place of Chrysler within the larger structure of the Chrysler Corporation during the mid-20th century. Chrysler offered several brands that covered different levels of the market. Plymouth served entry-level buyers. Dodge offered slightly more upscale models, DeSoto filled the middle ground, and Chrysler itself represented the upper end of the company's lineup. Within the Chrysler brand, the Windsor was positioned as a comfortable mid-range model. It was not as luxurious as the famous New Yorker, but it still carried many of the engineering strengths and thoughtful details that made Chrysler automobiles respected across the country. The Windsor first appeared in the late 1930s and continued for more than 2 decades. Over those years, it evolved through several design eras, each reflecting the changing tastes and technologies of American motoring. By the early 1950s, the Windsor had become a well-known family sedan. The styling of these cars reflected the optimism of the post-war years. The bodies were wide and smooth, with gentle curves that gave the car a graceful appearance. Chrome trim added brightness, and the front grille often carried a confident expression that made the car look proud without appearing aggressive. Standing beside a Chrysler Windsor in the mid-1950s, you might notice its balanced proportions. The hood stretched forward confidently, the passenger cabin offered generous space, and the rear of the car flowed smoothly toward the bumper. It looked like a car designed for comfortable travel rather than flashy display. Inside, the Windsor offered a welcoming interior that reflected Chrysler's attention to detail. The seats were wide and deeply cushioned, allowing passengers to relax during long journeys. Upholstery materials were carefully chosen to provide both durability and comfort. The dashboard was elegant, yet practical. Gauges were easy to read, and the controls were placed logically so drivers could operate them without distraction. In many ways, the Windsor interior captured the spirit of American cars from that era. Comfortable, spacious, and designed with everyday life in mind. For someone who is now around 60 years old, hearing about cars like the Windsor may bring back memories of stories from parents or grandparents who lived through the golden age of American automobiles. In the 1950s, the family car often played a central role in daily routines. The Windsor was exactly the kind of car that families trusted. It could carry children to school in the morning, parents to work during the day, and the whole family on weekend drives into the countryside. Under the hood, the Windsor relied on engines that emphasized smoothness and reliability. One of the most widely used engines in the model was the Chrysler Flathead 6. This engine had a long history within Chrysler vehicles and was respected for its durability. The Flathead 6 was not designed for racing or high-speed performance. Instead, it delivered steady, dependable power that made driving calm and predictable. When the driver pressed the accelerator, the car responded smoothly rather than aggressively. This kind of performance suited the Windsor perfectly. It was a car meant for comfortable cruising rather than fast acceleration. Driving a Windsor in the 1950s must have been a pleasant experience. The large steering wheel moved easily in the driver's hands, and the suspension absorbed bumps in the road with gentle ease. Passengers could sit back and enjoy the journey without feeling every crack in the pavement. Imagine starting a Windsor on a quiet summer morning. The engine comes to life with a soft, steady hum. The driver shifts into gear and pulls away from the curb. The car glides smoothly down the street as sunlight reflects off its polished chrome. Soon, the road opens into a long stretch of highway. The Windsor settles into a comfortable rhythm, the engine humming steadily as miles pass beneath the tires. For many drivers, this was the essence of American motoring during that era. The Windsor was also known for its durability. Chrysler engineers built these cars with solid frames and carefully designed mechanical systems. Many Windsors remained in service for years, sometimes passing from one owner to another as families grew and circumstances changed. Because of this long service life, the Windsor became deeply woven into everyday life. It was the car parked outside grocery stores, waiting in school pickup lines, and traveling down highways during summer vacations. Yet, despite its popularity during its time, the Windsor rarely receives much attention today. When people think about classic Chryslers, they often remember more luxurious or more dramatic models. Cars like the New Yorker, with its powerful engines and upscale features, tend to capture the spotlight. The Windsor, meanwhile, remains quietly in the background. But for historians and enthusiasts, the Windsor represents something equally important. It shows how Chrysler delivered quality engineering to everyday drivers. It was a car that balanced affordability with comfort and durability. Today, when collectors restore a Windsor, they are preserving a piece of automotive history that reflects the daily lives of mid-century America. Seeing one at a classic car gathering often sparks memories. Someone might recall riding in the back seat as a child. Another person might remember learning to drive in a car just like it. These memories remind us that automobiles are more than machines. They are part of the stories that shape our lives. Driving a Windsor today can feel like stepping back into a quieter time. The steering is deliberate and smooth. The engine runs with calm confidence. The car glides along the road with a gentle dignity that modern vehicles rarely match. Without digital screens or complex electronics, the experience is simple and direct. You feel the road, hear the engine, and appreciate the mechanical character of the car. The Chrysler Windsor may not receive the same recognition as some other classic cars, but it remains an important symbol of an era when comfort, reliability, and thoughtful engineering defined the American automobile. It was the kind of car that did its job quietly and faithfully, carrying families through the everyday moments that eventually become the memories of a lifetime.
The Ford Custom line was never designed to be the star of the showroom. It wasn't the flashiest car in Ford's lineup, and it didn't carry the boldest styling or the most luxurious features. Yet during the early 1950s, this modest automobile quietly became one of the most dependable companions on American roads. Thousands of families relied on it every day, trusting it to take them to work, school, church, and long summer vacations. While more glamorous cars captured headlines and advertisements, the Custom line simply did its job, and it did it well. To understand the importance of the Custom line, it helps to look at the position of Ford Motor Company in the early 1950s. Ford was one of the giants of the American automobile industry, competing fiercely with Chevrolet and Plymouth for the attention of everyday buyers. The company offered several levels of cars to meet different budgets and tastes. At the bottom of Ford's lineup was the basic mainline model, designed to be as affordable as possible. At the top was the Crest line, which included more luxurious trim and features. Right in the middle sat the Custom line. It offered a balance between price and comfort, making it one of the most practical choices for many families. The Custom line was introduced in 1952 as part of Ford's completely redesigned lineup. These new cars looked more modern than their predecessors. The bodies were longer, lower, and wider, reflecting the styling trends of the post-war era. Smooth curves replaced the more upright shapes of earlier cars, giving the vehicles a sense of motion even when they were parked. Standing beside a Custom line in the early 1950s, you would notice its calm and balanced appearance. The hood stretched forward gently toward a simple but confident grille. Chrome trim highlighted the body lines without overwhelming them. The overall effect was dignified and practical rather than flashy. This design suited the purpose of the Custom line perfectly. It was meant to appeal to people who valued reliability and comfort more than dramatic styling. Inside the car, the Custom line provided a spacious interior that could easily accommodate a family. The front seat was a wide bench, typical of American cars at the time, allowing 3 passengers to sit side by side if necessary. The rear seat offered plenty of legroom, making long trips comfortable for children and adults alike. The dashboard was simple and easy to understand. Gauges were clearly visible, and the controls were placed within easy reach of the driver. Everything about the interior was designed to make driving straightforward and comfortable. For someone who is now around 60 years old, hearing about cars like the Custom line may bring back memories of stories from parents or grandparents who lived through the early 1950s. In those years, the automobile had become an essential part of American life. Families depended on their cars for daily routines and weekend adventures. The Custom line was exactly the kind of car that filled that role. Under the hood, Ford offered several engine choices for the Custom line. One of the most common ones was the Ford Flathead V8, a design that had already earned a legendary reputation for durability. Introduced in the 1930s, the Flathead V8 had become one of the most famous engines in automotive history. The engine delivered steady power and a distinctive sound that many drivers recognized immediately. When the driver pressed the accelerator, the Custom line moved forward with a smooth and confident response. Later versions of the car also offered newer overhead valve engines, giving buyers the option of improved performance. Driving a Custom line in the early 1950s was a calm and comfortable experience. The steering wheel was large and easy to grip, and the suspension softened the bumps and rough surfaces that were common on many roads of that era. Imagine starting a Custom line on a quiet morning in 1954. The engine comes to life with a soft rumble. The driver pulls away from the curb and heads down a neighborhood street lined with modest houses and freshly planted trees. Soon, the car reaches a highway. The road stretches out toward the horizon, and the Custom line settles into a steady rhythm. The engine hums smoothly as the miles pass by. This kind of driving was exactly what the Custom line was built for. During the early 1950s, America was undergoing rapid change. Suburbs were expanding, highways were being built, and families were traveling farther than ever before. Reliable cars were essential for this new way of life. The Custom line fit perfectly into that environment. It was affordable enough for many families, but still offered the comfort and quality people expected from a Ford. Picture a typical family preparing for a summer trip in 1955. Suitcases are loaded into the trunk. Children climb into the back seat, excited for the journey ahead. The engine starts and the car pulls out onto the road, heading toward a beach, a national park, or a distant relative's home. Moments like these happen thousands of times across the country. Despite its popularity during its time, the Custom line gradually faded from public attention. As the years passed, newer models replaced it, and many of the cars were eventually scrapped after decades of use. Because the Custom line was considered an ordinary family car rather than a collector's item, very few examples survived. Yet today, when a well-preserved Custom line appears at a classic car show, it often attracts a different kind of admiration. Visitors recognize that this car represents the everyday life of a past era. Unlike rare sports cars or luxury vehicles, the Custom line tells the story of ordinary people and their journeys. Driving one today feels like stepping back into the early 1950s. The steering is gentle and deliberate. The engine produces a steady hum. The car glides along the road with a calm dignity that encourages relaxed travel rather than hurried speed. Without modern electronics or digital screens, the experience is simple and direct. The driver feels the connection between the car and the road. For enthusiasts and historians, the Ford Custom line represents something important: the dependable automobile that quietly supported the daily lives of countless American families. It may not have been the most glamorous car in Ford's history, but it played a vital role during a time when the automobile was helping shape the rhythm of everyday life across the country.